Welcome back, everybody. Today we're diving into something, well, kind of fascinating and maybe a little bit uncomfortable. We're talking about building up that thick skin, that unshakable mentality we all kind of wish we had. You know, life, it's not always smooth sailing, right?
Right. It's choppy waters out there.
It is. And we're not trying to avoid those storms. We're talking about learning how to sail right through them.
Exactly.
What do you think?
I think you're absolutely spot on. It's funny how we're wired to avoid discomfort, you know? Our brains just naturally want to seek out the easy path, that comfort zone.
Right.
But that really can backfire on us when we do hit those inevitable challenges, right?
It does.
We end up feeling so surprised, overwhelmed, like we just weren't prepared at all.
Totally. Like you got caught in the rain with no umbrella.
Yeah.
So what if there was a way to sort of mentally rehearse for those tough times? Almost like a mental fire drill.
I like that.
Yeah. That's where this whole idea of negative visualization comes in.
Yeah.
And look, I know the name sounds a little, maybe a little scary at first.
Yeah.
It's not about being a pessimist or just expecting the worst all the time. It's more about building that mental resilience. You know, like giving ourselves an emotional vaccine for life's curveballs.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Have you ever messed around with this kind of stuff?
You know, it's more common than you might think. The name negative visualization maybe is a bit off-putting, I'll grant you that. But it's not really about dwelling in negativity. It's about acknowledging that things are not always going to go our way.
Right.
You know, think of it like this. A beautiful flower in full bloom, it's gorgeous, right? But, you know, inevitably it's going to wilt. Or a relationship, it starts with all those sparks and passion. There's always a chance that it could fade. Life has cycles. And sometimes those cycles include, well, some more difficult experiences.
Okay. Okay, I'm starting to see what you're saying. But how does actually visualizing these less than ideal scenarios, how does that help us? Doesn't that just invite more negativity in?
Not necessarily. When we take the time to mentally walk through these challenging situations, we kind of take away their power to shock us when they actually happen, you know, to just completely derail us.
Okay.
We actually become less reactive, more adaptable. So imagine you're suddenly asked to give a presentation.
Oh, I hate that.
Right. But if you had mentally rehearsed that very scenario, even if you pictured a few things going wrong, you'd be so much more composed and ready to handle it in the moment.
Right.
You're basically building mental antibodies against stress and anxiety.
So we're kind of pre-gaming for the emotional roller coaster so we can ride it out with a little more style.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. You know, our source actually compared this to James Bond. The guy always seems so cool under pressure. It's like, how does he do it?
Right. It's not just Hollywood magic. He's able to maintain his composure because he's already mentally prepared for a bunch of different outcomes.
Right.
The good and the bad. So nothing really catches him off guard. He's considered the possibilities. He's planned accordingly.
Now, that's a mental model I can get behind. And this actually reminds me of something you mentioned earlier, that whole emotional detachment thing. Sounds a bit like something a Zen master would say, but how does that tie into negative visualization?
Oh, that's a great question. Emotional detachment in this context, it really is just about recognizing that those difficult emotions, they're a part of the human experience. It's not about suppressing them or denying them. It's about learning to just observe them, to see them without getting completely swept away.
So creating a little space between us and our knee-jerk reactions.
Exactly. When we can create that space, we suddenly have more choices in how we respond. We're not just reacting on autopilot. That can be incredibly powerful.
It can. It's like we're taking back the reins, becoming the captain of our own emotional ship, even when the seas get rough.
I like that.
And you know, that story from the source about getting fired, that really drove this point home for me. Like, obviously not a happy experience, but having mentally prepared for the possibility allowed them to move on in a much healthier way. Didn't just completely spiral.
Exactly. It's not about wishing for bad things to happen. It's about acknowledging they could happen. And that way we're not blindsided. We can respond thoughtfully, not just purely emotionally. So think about it. What are some areas in your own life where this kind of mental preparation could be useful?
That's a good question. Public speaking is a big one for me. Always makes me nervous. Or maybe like navigating a disagreement with a friend or family member, those can get heated.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
almost like having this emotional toolkit ready to go, regardless of what life throws my way.
I love that analogy. And you're right, the beauty of this technique is that it really can apply to so many areas of life, from those everyday things like traffic to the bigger challenges.
Yeah.
The key is to personalize it. You got to find those areas where you tend to feel most vulnerable and use this technique to build that resilience.
So not about becoming obsessed with everything that could go wrong, but more about proactively building our capacity to handle whatever comes up. It's like cross-training for our minds.
Exactly.
But I am curious, are there any downsides? Are we risking anything by constantly thinking about what could go wrong?
That's a really important point, and it's something to be mindful of. There's a fine line between mentally preparing and spiraling into anxiety. So it's crucial to approach this with a sense of balance and self-awareness. Yeah, you really got to find that sweet spot, where you're being proactive, but not letting those what-if thoughts kind of take over.
Right.
The goal is to empower ourselves, not get consumed by worry. We want to be prepared, not paralyzed.
Okay, so how do we actually strike that balance? It all sounds great in theory, but I imagine actually putting this into practice can be a little tricky.
For sure, it's a skill, and just like any skill, it takes practice and the right tools.
Right.
One of the most effective ways to start is just setting aside some dedicated time each day for this mental rehearsal.
Like scheduling a workout, but for our mind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just like we prioritize our physical fitness, it's important to prioritize our mental fitness.
Okay.
Even 5 to 10 minutes a day can make a huge difference.
So during those 5 or 10 minutes, what are we doing?
Yeah.
Just sitting there worrying.
No, not at all. It's about focused, intentional practice. So I suggest starting with one specific area you want to build more resilience in. Could be anything that tends to trigger your anxiety or stress. Maybe it's public speaking, maybe it's handling criticism, maybe it's those difficult conversations with a colleague.
Right, so we pick our battleground, so to speak.
Exactly.
And then what?
Then it's about bringing that scenario to life in your mind.
Yeah.
Using as much detail as possible.
Okay.
Engage all your senses. What would you see? What would you hear? What would you feel? Even smell in that situation. The more vivid you can make it, the more effective it's going to be.
This is where it gets really interesting. Because we're not just passively watching it all unfold, we're actively choosing how we want to respond in that moment.
Yes.
It's almost like writing our own mental script.
Exactly. Just like an actor rehearses their lines, you are mentally rehearsing your responses to these difficult situations. Walk yourself through the steps you take to navigate that challenge. What would you say? How would you manage your emotions? What actions would you prioritize?
It's like giving ourselves a preview of the game film before the big game.
Right.
But I can imagine, it's not always easy to stay detached and objective, especially when we're visualizing something that, brings up some strong emotions.
You're right, and that's where self-awareness comes in, and a healthy dose of compassion. Remember, the goal is not to suppress our emotions. It's to observe them without letting them control us.
So it's about creating that space we were talking about before.
Exactly. It's about acknowledging those feelings of anxiety, fear, frustration, without getting completely swept away by them. And you'll find as you practice this, you'll be able to respond to those emotions with more intention. You'll have more choice in how you react.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how powerful this could be. Instead of being at the mercy of our emotions, we're taking back the reins a little bit.
Right.
Any other tips to make this practice work? Make it really effective?
One that I find really, really helpful is to incorporate affirmations.
Oh, okay. Affirmations, like positive self-talk?
Exactly. After you visualize that challenging scenario, spend a couple minutes repeating affirmations that reinforce your strength, your resilience.
Give me an example.
Sure. So you could say things like, I am capable of handling this, or I have the resources I need to overcome this challenge,
Right.
or even, I am strong and resilient.
So we're kind of giving ourselves a pep talk before we head into the arena.
Exactly. And affirmations are powerful because they help to reprogram our subconscious mind, and they help to build that belief in ourselves. They're a key tool for cultivating a more positive mindset.
So we're combining mental rehearsal with positive self-talk. It's a double whammy against the negativity.
Exactly.
So how do we know if it's actually working? Like what are some signs we're getting better at this?
Pay attention to how you respond to those challenging situations in your everyday life. Are you calmer, more collected? Are you able to think more clearly under pressure? Are you bouncing back from setbacks more quickly? These are all really positive indicators that the practice is paying off.
So it's about noticing those subtle shifts in our reactions, how we're showing up differently.
Exactly. And beyond those immediate benefits, you might even notice a decrease in your overall stress and anxiety, stronger relationships, an increased sense of well-being. Yeah. It's amazing how just a few minutes of daily practice can create a ripple effect across so many areas of our lives.
It's like we're strengthening our core, our inner foundation.
Yeah.
And that has a positive effect on everything we do.
Totally.
But let's be real. For some people, the idea of deliberately confronting their fears through visualization, that can be pretty intimidating. How do we get over that initial hurdle of fear?
That's a great point. Fear is a natural human experience, but we often give it way more power than it deserves. Fear really thrives in the darkness of the unknown.
So by shining a light on those fears through visualization, we're kind of taking away their power to control us.
Exactly. When we face our fears head on, we often realize that they're not nearly as scary as we imagine them to be.
It reminds me of that saying, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
It's such a powerful quote. Fear can paralyze us, or it can be a catalyst for growth. It all depends on how we choose to relate to it.
So how do we encourage our listener to embrace fear rather than avoid it?
I think it starts with recognizing that fear isn't the enemy. It's just a signal that we're stretching ourselves, that we're stepping outside of our comfort zone, and that's where the real magic happens.
That's where we grow,
Yeah.
we learn, we evolve.
Exactly. So next time you feel that familiar feeling of fear creeping in, don't shy away from it. Lean into it. Embrace it as an opportunity to grow.
And use negative visualization as a tool to explore that fear, understand it, and ultimately transcend it.
That's the journey, right? To move beyond those self-imposed limitations and create a life that is both meaningful and fulfilling. But it's important to remember that even in the midst of all those challenges, there's always something to be grateful for.
Yeah, you bring up a key point, perspective. Even when things are tough, there are always those silver linings, things to appreciate.
Exactly. Negative visualization is not about denying the reality of challenging circumstances. It's about acknowledging them,
Right.
while simultaneously cultivating a sense of gratitude for what we do have.
So it's about finding that balance between preparedness and appreciation.
Absolutely. And when we can hold both of those perspectives simultaneously, we create this powerful foundation for resilience and inner peace.
I love that. So it's not about pretending that everything's perfect. It's about choosing to focus on the good, even when things are tough. It's about training our minds to see those opportunities for growth and learning in every situation.
Beautifully said. And that shift in perspective can be transformative.
Well, we've covered a lot in this part of our deep dive. We've explored practical techniques, we talked about the role of fear, and we highlighted the importance of perspective. It feels like we've given our listener a pretty solid foundation to start building their mental resilience.
We have. But we're not quite done yet.
Oh.
There's still more to explore. In our final part of the deep dive, we'll talk about some common pitfalls to avoid, and we'll even share some advanced techniques for those who are ready to take their negative visualization practice to the next level.
Plus, we'll leave you with some inspiring takeaways to help you continue on this journey toward building that unshakable mental fortitude.
Stay tuned for the final chapter.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. We've explored a lot about negative visualization, the how-tos, even facing those fears. But now I'm kind of curious, are there any common pitfalls we should watch out for? Like, things people might accidentally get wrong when they first start trying this?
Oh, that's a great question. And yeah, there are definitely some traps to be aware of. I think one of the biggest ones is getting stuck in that loop of negativity. It's easy to overdo it. The goal isn't to become obsessed with worst-case scenarios, but to use them strategically. Like, as you said earlier, a mental dress rehearsal.
So it's not about just constantly picturing everything going wrong.
No, not at all. It's about finding that balance between mental preparation and dwelling. Think of it like packing a first aid kit for a hike. You want to be prepared for those scrapes, those bruises, but you don't want to spend the whole hike worried about every possible injury.
Makes sense. And, I've heard some people worry that negative visualization could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you keep thinking about something bad happening, you're going to actually attract it into your life.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
It's understandable, to have that concern. I hear it a lot. But I think it's really important to make that distinction between mentally rehearsing for a challenge, and actively trying to manifest a negative outcome. Your intention matters.
So it's more about saying, okay,
Okay.
if this happens, here's how I'd handle it, not I'm going to focus on this negative outcome and will it into being.
Exactly. Subtle but important difference. Negative visualization, when it's done right, it's about empowering yourself, not inviting bad luck.
Right, right. So for those who are finding this helpful and want to, take it a step further, any advanced techniques or variations they can explore, like to really level up.
Oh, absolutely. There's a technique I really like called future self journaling. It's where you actually write from the perspective of your future self who has already successfully navigated that challenge you're facing.
Oh, wow. So we're kind of borrowing wisdom and strength from our future selves.
Exactly. And it can be super powerful for shifting your perspective and tapping into a deeper level of confidence and clarity. You can ask yourself questions like, what did I learn from this experience? What strengths did I rely on? How did I actually overcome it? It's like getting advice from a wiser, more experienced version of you.
I love that. A mental time machine for growth. Any other advanced tips you want to share?
You can also try integrating visualization into your everyday routine. Instead of needing dedicated time for it, you can weave it into things you already do, like your commute, showering, even doing the dishes.
So we're turning those everyday moments into little mini workouts for our minds.
Exactly. While you're driving, you could mentally rehearse a tough conversation you need to have. Or while you're getting ready in the morning, visualize yourself nailing that presentation at work.
Sneak in those reps. I like it. Well, I think we've covered a ton in this deep dive, from the basics to those advanced tips, even the potential pitfalls. I think our listener is walking away with a really solid understanding of negative visualization and how to use it.
I hope so. It's all about, remember, building mental strength is a journey. It's not about reaching a destination. It's about those daily choices we make that support our growth, our resilience.
And negative visualization can be such a powerful tool for that. It lets us face our fears, build confidence, and create a life that feels truly fulfilling and meaningful.
Absolutely. And remember, life, it throws a mix of challenges and triumphs at us. By building that mental fortitude, we can navigate it all with a little more grace, resilience, and wisdom.
Well said. And that's exactly what this deep dive has been all about, giving ourselves the mental and emotional tools to face whatever comes our way. So thanks for joining us. Keep practicing. You've got this.